Hello and welcome. I'm here with Dvija, and Dvija studies philosophy at the University of Glasgow. Tell us a bit about what you focus on.
Okay, so currently I am working on my dissertation, my master's dissertation, and I am working on the area of phenomenal consciousness in AI as well as humans, and how these two kind of run at like parallels together. And yeah, it's gonna have some good potential in the future also. Mhm.
All right. So what we want to discuss today is consciousness in machines, in intelligent machines, in artificial intelligence. And the first question is, why would we attribute consciousness to an AI? Like, what properties would you say does an AI have that would justify calling it conscious?
I think the ability, I think the most basic starting points would be the ability to kind of reason, accepting some sort of information or stimuli or input and understanding it in the first place, and then reasoning with it in order to create this sort of response from it. I think that would be one of the most important things that could attribute to consciousness. But that kind of attributes to the access consciousness bit. Um, well, there's quite a bit more when we would think of attributing phenomenal consciousness to AI, but I think the starting point would be the just like accepting the input, understanding it truly, and then responding to it. At perhaps a later, more advanced stage, it could probably bring a sense of self-awareness or authenticity in certain areas. Yeah.
What do you mean by access consciousness as opposed to phenomenal consciousness?
Right. Okay. So as far as the research that's been done right now in consciousness, Ned Block came up with the two neural correlates of consciousness. So currently, the way we describe consciousness is by correlating it with like brain processes. And so these are called the neural correlates of consciousness. So far, we've got two distinct neural correlates, which are the access and the phenomenal. The access and the phenomenal can exist with or without each other. So the whole access bit is like thinking of maybe the brain or maybe like artificial intelligence machine, or either of these things, like a particular system, a global workspace wherein all the information available, like the working memory, the historic memory, the ability to reason, understand, um, those kind of things, those work in the access bit. So when a person or even a machine supposedly has an input of information or a stimuli, the way it perceives it, it kind of has this accessing of information going on, which in a way lets it understand and reason and then produce an output. But with the phenomenal bit of consciousness, I'm sorry, there's something.
Yeah.
But with
Right.
the phenomenal bit of consciousness, I would say it is, I think it's a lot to do with what it is like to be oneself, or what it is like to have an experience, say, of just maybe walking in the park and having, there's a lot going on. A person walking through a park is going to have several experiences, but also knows that there is something it is like to be feeling those things, something it is like to be, feeling the sting of pain when a bee probably stings them or something like that. Yeah, in short.
And you would say there is a bigger difficulty, or how do you say, you'd be more skeptical to attribute phenomenal consciousness to an AI rather than access consciousness. Like it's more plausible to attribute some sort of access consciousness, because you mentioned when I asked you earlier about why attribute consciousness to AI, you mentioned a sort of ability to reason with information that's given to them. The question is, at what point can we speak of reasoning, and at what point is it still merely a statistical algorithm that's at play there? Or is the statistical algorithm already enough to be granted access consciousness?
So yeah, that's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, I would think it would be easier to attribute access consciousness to AI rather than phenomenal for several reasons. Mainly because if an AI is even phenomenally conscious, I don't know if we would know. Like we can. It's like it's the problem of the other minds, which is again like
Right.
how you to know if the AI feels like there's something it's like to be itself. Um, but in terms of the access bit, I think I think that, like, for example, if we've got like this machine that performs simple tasks like just you input some stuff in it, it's maybe a chatbot or something very basic. We're not as far as the machines we have right now. It's difficult to say if they're even access conscious, mainly because of the Chinese room argument, wherein,
Right.
again, like you said, like we don't know if it truly understands or if it's just a bunch of information and bits that it's kind of like just sorting through and kind of just giving the answers based on the syntax or the algorithm that's been provided to it. But maybe a stage wherein, like, again, like I'm really interested in the whole creativity aspect, and I feel like the reason why I think it's important is because it could help us understand when this machine could reach a sort of conscious state.
When it
Because
is creative in a way that cannot be reduced to just remixing data it has
exactly.
been given.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I. And for that reason, I've really been interested in the DALI 2 by the open,
Mhm.
like created by the OpenAI.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that that's something that could really help understand consciousness.
Speaking of which, I actually
Yeah.
had the mini DALI that's free accessible create like psychedelic looking images for me. Like there
Oh,
is
okay.
I've got like really weird looking
Yeah.
uh, kind of spiritual looking entities.
Okay.
I don't know if the filter keeps blurring out whatever I'm showing,
Right.
right?
It's all
But
right. Yeah,
um,
that's really cool.
yeah, so just to elaborate in case someone listening is not fully familiar with the Chinese room argument, what you're saying basically is there is this thought experiment where you could input something into this machine, but there could be just someone with a huge dictionary that has like an answer to each input and that outputs it. And then the output will seem like it's conscious, but it's actually just a very deterministic if A, then B kind of dictionary process. And the creativity aspect comes in when something comes out of the machine that cannot be found in that dictionary. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I think, and that's why I kind of feel like in the future maybe we do or maybe we can attribute the whole phenomenal consciousness to this sort of a creative machine. But okay, we can, yeah.
And would you say that you said the problem with phenomenal consciousness or attributing phenomenal consciousness is the problem of other minds. So we similarly would have that with animals, for example.
Right, exactly.
Would you say it's still there's a difference with machines? Would you say it's still less likely they're phenomenally conscious than, let's say, me trying to figure out whether you are phenomenally conscious or a monkey or something?
I think so. I think the reason what I personally think is that the machines that we have right now are not even fully access conscious the way that the human brain works. If that stage is achievable, if that stage um, arrives at some point, then there could be scope for phenomenal consciousness.
Would you say it
Uh,
is achievable?
I think it could be, yeah, at some point if we find a way to, like, I don't know, code like feelings and emotions in just access bed, because with that comes a lot more of what it is likeness to a certain experience. Then the machine could at some point have its own subjective experiences, which in turn, again, we would again face the problem otherwise we wouldn't know. But if it ends up creating something without us having to tell it what to do at some point, then that means that it has this sort of inner life, that it has subjective experiences in some way, or maybe a little different than we do, but in some capacity, I would say.
Right. So I have to admit, I kind of come from a camp of like fundamental skeptics about this. Like, I would say I'm not sure whether an AI could ever be conscious. And the argument that I come from comes from more computational or logical consideration. Like, have you ever heard of Hubert Dreyfus? He's written a book called What Computers Still Can't Do, which is old, like it's from the 80s, so it could be outdated.
Yeah.
However, the argument I find is still relevant, and Roger Penrose, the physicist, has given a similar one, and that is, if we construct a machine, if we construct a device, and in this case, the device is the computer, so most of AIs are algorithms that run by some sort of computer, then it is limited by the certain rules it has been programmed with. So it is limited to the rules of what is computable and what isn't. And it has been shown that these systems are always incomplete. That means there will always be tasks that are incomputable for the device, but the observer, the human observer, can recognize this incomputability and can in turn actually resolve it. That means the system of the machine is always somehow subordinate to the conscious observer. And therefore, like I've spoken to, in one of my other videos, to Professor Möller. He was also one of the speakers at the event in Cambridge. And he says he focuses a lot on the concept of artificial communication rather than artificial intelligence. He says it could be a bit of a misconception to regard this machine as a separate entity, but rather it is kind of a sort of communication which redirects, like the communication of thousands of inputs to you when you interact with it, and then kind of creates a resemblance or a simulation, an abstraction of conscious behavior that has been inputted into it. But it's like looking in the mirror and concluding that the mirror is conscious instead of saying it's just a reflection of someone that's conscious. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, that is very fair. But what I do think is that the reason why I think that maybe these machines could arrive at a state of consciousness is because currently, with the research that is going on in the whole subject of consciousness for humans as well, because we still don't have 100% clarity about what consciousness truly is in just humans or animals, and we're already jumping towards the whole AI bit, which leaves out so many like explanatory gaps in the middle. But what I do think that they're trying to do is like go through it parallelly and hoping to like find some sort of a common ground or find some sort of answers to both these problems simultaneously, right? And so what I think is that, right, there are different types of AIs that they're creating these days, right? And with the whole cognitive AI, the whole idea of like simulating the neural networks of a human brain in order to create an artificial neural network and then see how that would work. So my whole idea is that if most of the theories of consciousness that have been put forward till now, global workspace, integrated information, and
higher order thought and recurrent loops and whatever.
Yeah, all of that, then it should be the case that if we are to simulate a neural network like of person X, like the same thing, right? The whole neural network, the entirety of the brain processes, then whatever we do find has got to behave like this neural network on some level. And if it means that it is maybe access conscious in the way that we probably are, then that would at least, I mean, let us believe that, okay, with the theories we do have right now, makes sense. Consciousness makes sense.
Yeah.
The phenomenal bit, I do agree, is I personally don't know how I would answer that, or how we could achieve that. But again, that's just something we would find out in theory, maybe when these things are carried out.
I recently had a discussion with a friend of mine, and we arrived at an interesting analogy, and that is like and that's not being judgmental about AI. It's just meant to be as an analogy. So one could say, in what I've explained earlier, that AIs would be conscious in the same way a virus is alive.
Okay.
So, and it's not being judgmental. It's not meaning like AI is a virus and it's bad. It's just the pure biology of it. So a virus is often disputed whether it's alive or not, because it cannot reproduce by its own means. And in the same way, this kind of what you would call creativity is kind of jumping outside of its own system, meaning creating something that's not within its own system. It seems to be not able to do without the host, the human, in a sense, which doesn't mean we're superior. Like, it doesn't mean that we're always going to outperform them. You can become very dependent. You can fall prey to a virus, you know, and you can fall prey to, right? So the problem is here. Sometimes I think about it, and I think our common friend Henry has even written a paper on it, Uncanny Believers. It's like, even if they're not conscious, I think enough people will consider them conscious regardless of what we say and what our like discussions conclude. A lot of people consider them conscious, and I'd like to know what you think, what the consequences are of those two options: A, them being actually conscious, or B, them not being conscious, however most people still treating them as if.
Right. Okay, so let's look at A first, which is them actually being conscious.
Yeah.
Now, I think with the territory of consciousness comes a lot of, I would say, a lot of freedom in some sense, right? Like, for us as humans, being conscious means it allows us to not only understand and respond to things rationally, but also have our own subjective experiences, understanding what every single experience feels like. Like, our brain is constantly exposed to, I don't even know how many things, and still it provides this unified experience, right? And somehow these experiences are embedded in our working memory, in our historical memory, and all of that. And I think this whole memory aspect also plays a big role in consciousness, in identifying things and then being able to have a good response to it. Not just that, but also just actually being truly self-aware of every subjective experiences that's being had. What this provides us with is like this background, like this safety net, I would say, of something that allows us to be free, in the sense that we are allowed to feel things subjectively on our own, create things over and above what is asked of us to do, right? The whole idea of authenticity and self-identity, I think, comes from there. Big metaphysical questions being like, you know, kind of being scrunched up something small.
my most successful video on my channel is actually a long discussion with Professor Möller about authenticity and prophelicity and all that.
Yeah. So I do think that the idea of being phenomenally or access conscious, or just overall consciousness overall, the reason why I distinguish the two is because I do see a distinct difference between them. But yeah, so all of this comes along with this whole idea of self-awareness and being conscious. Now with AI, the thing is that right now, as far as we know that it's aware of the external world in a way where it knows the information coming from the outside in a way, but I don't think it understands the concept of an inner world or inner life like we have an inner life. We have higher order thoughts, higher order representations. if it were to achieve that, if the difference, I think, lies in the fact that the way we perceive things, the way our brain perceives things and segregates them or combines them together is a lot different than a machine would, because of the way the algorithms are coded and just the way it is. I think it's also just something that we're made of something different, and the machine was made of based on like syntaxes and algorithms and code, right? So I think that's where the different lies. But if it were to be conscious at one point, like us, like if it was an artificial neural network that actually behaves like us and has these deep feelings, emotions, understanding, authenticity, ability to create, ability to feel, all of that, then I think that would be a big stepping stone for like the research in human consciousness and being able to create that. It could provide a lot more scope for, you know, uploading human consciousness into something.
But what would happen to society? I could imagine, like, if you have
Have-
having such entities with that power would
Right.
quite be disruptive, no?
I think it would be, I think most people think so, that this could be a downfall in a way because we're creating something new. But it's almost like, to me, I feel like it's almost like creating a child, you know, like what's, I mean, I know there's a difference. I know that the artificial intelligence is going to be maybe a bit more advanced because it has the capacity to have a lot more information. But if in a way we expose it to the good things, to the things that can actually help it advance the human civilization, I don't know if that should be a problem. But obviously, yes, the whole idea of freedom and authenticity is a scary one, especially for something that we don't personally understand what it is like to be that thing, right? So,
Right. I
and
mean, like, for sorry to interrupt.
go ahead.
The you often get these scenarios, right, with these horror scenarios of the machines
Right.
destroying
Yeah.
us all. And I'm thinking, like, even if they don't become hostile, which I think is unlikely anyways, there's still a danger in this. Like, for example, we humans, we don't hate animals. We don't
Mhm.
we don't declare war on them. We don't want them to die. But still, in the way we live,
We
we
are
have a
fine.
certain type of animal which we mass produce, which are more numerous than they've ever been, and then another category of animals which are declining, right?
Right. So,
And in the same way, a conscious entity of that power probably wouldn't need to hate us or anything,
right.
but a certain category of us could be in their way or could be just,
Right.
disregarded by them. That's
So, I mean, this has definitely been one of the main questions when it comes to the whole AI consciousness aspect. And I think that is why the research that's being done is kind of limited and kind of restricted also.
right.
Because, you know, yes, we're interested in knowing how it would work. We're interested in being able to simulate an artificial neural network, yes. But that is for good reason, for very anthropocentric reasons of being able to kind of advance or upload our consciousness in this artificial system. Again, with the intention of advancing the human civilization. Because, yeah, it is true that there are all these notions of hostility and the whole negative aspect that could come along. But these are just questions for maybe one day when maybe the self-consciousness is achievable or not. For right now, why I do think there's sort of research is important is basically because it's kind of helping understand human consciousness a lot more than just AI. I think these two things go very much hand in hand, and they should be progressing together. Yeah.
All right. Well, then we still have the last point. That is, what if it doesn't become conscious, yet
And
it is seen as conscious? I mean, I already see the beginnings of this. Like, Henry likes to talk about this app
yeah,
Replica,
okay.
and you do get a lot of people that, how do you say, they replace authentic interaction with an AI. So a lot of people have this app Replica, and they kind of start developing this relationship or this dependency, emotional dependency on this virtual girlfriend. And you can assume the more intelligent, sophisticated these systems get, the more people will spend time with them, right? Instead of actually, you know, going through the difficulties of dealing with real people. Like, it's often way messier and way less fun to try and get on with real humans, but there is an actual thing missing if you don't do it, if you don't try and get on with real people. And this could, you know, go on and get even more extreme. Or how do you see this? Do you have like maybe a not so negative aspect to it?
Well, this oh my God, it's an interesting question, because the whole idea of like, you know, humans believing that AI could be conscious, or already is, it's already catching up, you know, with the whole Lambda incident, and just like a lot of other stuff. I think when people see machines like, I don't know if you know, it's a very old machine actually, Sophie or Sophia, I don't remember what it's called, one of the two. People start believing that, hey, this machine, you know, it's understanding things, it's creating things, it's kind of learning things. But I think the whole reason why people do think so is because the machines that they're making today are based on these kind of networks that allow for self-learning for these machines. The whole system is that the more information given to it, the more experiences it has, the more it learns. It learns its errors and corrects them in like this loop, right? And so it keeps learning on its own the more it's been exposed to things. And that's why it's already getting advanced, like these chatbots, or like you mentioned, the whole replica thing. It's again made of, I think, like just a simple thing like a chatbot, right? I don't know if it's more than that.
I think it's pretty much a chatbot, but if it's designed in a certain, like, it can always learn with new data, but there is a certain base algorithm that doesn't change. It doesn't change its algorithm. Obviously, how would it? And it is designed for a certain purpose. So it is designed to become your friends, to adapt to you. And I would say someone who is a real person, if you are doing something wrong, or there's something, let's say, off about your own way of living, a real person would feel that, and there'd be friction. A real person, a good friend, would tell you to stop smoking, stop doing whatever. Obviously, a chatbot that is made to have as many users as possible won't really do that, and people will think it's conscious, treat it like a person, but then in reality it's an algorithm to get the people to spend as much time on it, just like Facebook.
Yeah. And I think, again, what people would be missing out in this area is, again, like, we're circling back to the Chinese room argument, but again, right, so I don't think it's going to be understanding what is truly being said to it. Again, it's just accessing this sort of information or syntax it has, and then responding to it in the way that it's meant to be doing that. So yeah, this could definitely have some sort of a negative impact on people who are ready to believe things like this, believe that, hey, oh yeah, this is as human as it gets. And I think it's interesting also to see how we attribute the whole idea of consciousness to humans so much more than anything else, right? With animals also, I think we've had a bit of, I've read a ton of papers about, you know, oh, someone saying, hey, fish don't feel pain, so they're not conscious, and just a whole bunch of stuff. But right, like this would be really, yeah, I think it would be interesting, like you said also, that this chatbot, or this whatever this machine is, the system is not going to feel when things are off or not true. Again, like for the human who's sitting opposite to it, is probably just, I don't know, living in this some sort of fantasy wherein they're not ready to accept what is real and what's not. And this could kind of, you know, lead to like much bigger existential questions as to, you know, where people actually start questioning what is truly real and not.
Yeah.
Right.
There's some relevant philosophical questions being addressed there, because you, how'd you say, for a complete solipsist, you know, it wouldn't make a difference whether you're talking to a conscious person or someone who's just Chinese room faking the consciousness. But if there is a real measurable difference in like health, psychological health deterioration, even though you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, there seems to be some instinctual understanding that you haven't been talking to a real person all this time.
Yeah, there's got to be this primitive sort of instinct, like you said, right? And I think that, I mean, also I don't know if I'm a big fan of David Chalmers actually, and
he was at the conference last week. Yeah,
really was he?
Yeah.
I'd like to know everything.
Yeah, I personally didn't talk to him to be honest, but he was there. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. So I read his recent book, Reality Plus, right, where he's addressing all these questions about what is going to be real when things like actually start happening, virtual worlds and simulations and just AI consciousness, right? The whole questions of what will truly be real are going to start, you know, clouding people's minds, and I think that would be another bridge they would have to cross when they start believing things like this. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good point to wrap up.